Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has.
Welcome to Island Influencers, where we share stories of successful business owners, experienced professionals, entrepreneurs and community leaders based or with influence in the Isle of Man. This podcast is brought to you by Thornton Chartered Financial Planners, because great financial planning has the power to change your life. Now here's your host, Chartered Financial Planner Sharon Sutton.
Welcome to this week's episode of Island Influencers. Via her Maverick Maker business, she coaches, she mentors founders, leaders, boards, teams, and businesses to lead in turbulent times by thinking differently, increasing personal and business productivity, and creating opportunity out of challenge, change, and connections. My guest this week is Carol Glover. Ultimately, Carol is unlocking their leadership mindset for success. As a CEO, board member, and generalist leader in a range of dynamic, forward-looking organizations, sectors, and roles, Carol's past corporate career means she already wears the shoes of so many of her clients. Recently, she co-created Encoded Potential, working with some of the world's biggest businesses, helping emerging leaders and entrepreneurs unleash world-class latent skills and potential for themselves and their teams. She's also produced the Entrepreneur Development Strategy for the Isle of Man Chamber of Commerce, generating over 150 small business members and, more importantly, a strong and growing mutually supportive community on the Isle of Man. I hope you enjoy this week's conversation with Carol Glover, episode 41. Welcome, Carol. Welcome to Island Influencers.
Hello, Sharon. I'm delighted to be here.
It's great to have you. Let's kick off and go straight into, tell me all about, where's Carol Glover come from?
Carol Glover came from being Carol Roscombs of Dukes Road, Douglas, Isle of Man, a very long time ago, the eldest of 5 daughters of Sid Roscombs, a big sporty guy, and Irene, who was a hairdresser. Dad was a plumber, Mum was a hairdresser, and she did amateur dramatics and wrote poetry, and so we ended up with a load of really lively daughters who did poetry, acting, speaking, played all sorts of sport, and I know you were a big sports person, but I consider playing at a good level of sport to be really fundamental to what happened to me. Then I did something that I always describe, and so I'm probably going to say a naughty word here, but I wasn't one of the brightest at school, but I was very flipping determined and very persistent. Yeah. 2 skills that have served me well throughout my life. So I ended up staying on and doing A-levels, not being one of the brightest in my class, which, 5 people went to Oxford and Cambridge in my class at school, so it was hard to be one of the brightest, and I wasn't anyway. I'm not academic, and you may hear me say that as we talk. I have a lot of inherent intelligence, but it's nothing I ever learned at school. So I'm one of those people who, because of maybe the sport, because of my determination, kept going. Yeah. But actually, it was very flipping hard for me, very flipping hard. And so I didn't apply to uni or anything. And then in the last year I was at Douglas High School, it went co-educational. So I'd been at the girls' high school forever. And in the last year, there was a wonderful deputy head, Harry Taverner, who is pretty fundamental to everything that's ever happened to me.
Oh, so, gosh. Isn't that wonderful? Harry's still around.
He is, I believe. And because he knew I read a lot, because I'd read every book in Douglas Library. My family wasn't terribly well off. We used to work a lot. I used to wash glasses in a pub, in about 3 pubs in Douglas for my 6th form. So Harry knew I'd read all the books. So he started to lend me books of his, and I would read them and we'd discuss them. And he said to me, "What are you going to do when you finish?" And I said, "Well, I did want to go in the RAF and be like my dad in physical fitness, but I'm not going to do that." I looked at it. So he said, "What about doing business? Because you and your sisters have worked since you were young, because we did it to bring money in. And, also our family believed in work." So, my first job, aged 13, was in a shop called the Book Centre in Douglas, aged 13.
Gosh, yeah.
And I worked many jobs ever since. So anyway, Harry encouraged me to think about polytechnics, business studies, phoned some up. Off I went to do business studies at Teesside Poly, thanks to Harry making a phone call and me getting to, we'll call them rubbish A-levels.
A-levels.
I had to get 2, and they didn't come much lower than what I got. Oh, but off I went. Yeah. And the other thing that was pretty fundamental was the first day I was at Teesside Poly, where I went, I went in to sign on and I said, is there a room where the females sign on? And they said, nope. This is it, me and 34 lads for 4 years. Right. So that has been very fundamental to the way I've approached the whole female issue at work. So, these things happen and you think, wow, this is weird. Actually, in hindsight, not weird. So I worked there. I had to do a year in industry. There was a placement that was only for a female, so I had no choice about it. I was dispatched off to a clothing factory in Stockton-on-Tees for a year, where I did everything. The women hated the fact that there was this little clever clogs in, and I wasn't clever. So they gave me all the hard jobs to do in the factory. It was a really good learning about
what sort of thing did they give you?
Sweeping the floor.
Oh, right, okay.
Doing 8 hours a day on the ironing press. I mean, things that I was rubbish at anyway, and I hated. But as happens in life, the production manager of the factory had a heart attack. And he was off, and it was a business that, was very cost-driven. And they're like, right, we need to find somebody to fill in, get the student off the ironing press. She can learn. And so that's what I did for like half of my placement. I filled in for the production manager, met a lot of retailers, found out about this amazing world of retail. And so I went back to the Poly with lots of them saying, give us a call when you're finished, give us a call. And I had 11 job offers when I left Teesside Poly.
Fantastic.
With my business studies degree. And off I went. And I actually had a funny thing in that I chose not to go to the London area. I'm a bit northern from the Isle of Man. So I went to the northwest and then with Littlewoods. And then after 6 weeks, they moved me to Western Avenue in London. And I was so fuming. But they did have one vacancy in 3 months' time in Manchester. And there were 4 of us going for it. But only one person was going to Manchester. And it was quite serious about that. But I then worked for Littlewoods, and then I ended up with a fab career at Littlewoods, the stores. It was a wonderful environment to be in. Then I got headhunted to Halfords by one of my old bosses from Littlewoods, and I went there in stock control and distribution because that was what I did. Yeah. When I was like 25 at Littlewoods, retail is hilarious. It's a bit like the tech world now. When I was 25, I was looking after stock control for children's wear, women's wear, and household for all the Littlewoods stores in the north of England.
Golly.
And you go 25. And it's like, it seems like something I never did.
But was it computerized in any way at that point?
It
had actually started by then.
Littlewoods were the most, ironically, because they always sort of had the impression of perhaps being a little bit sleepy and older targeted. They were the biggest believers in tech and also leadership development. Gosh. So I actually ended up in the perfect place for someone who was going to have a long career in retail. So I got headhunted to Halfords, and I went there as a merchandiser, and my first department was windscreen and car chemicals.
Great.
Exactly, fabulous. Very important thing about retail is it's a really good idea, I think, not to work at something you enjoy, not something that's your passion, because I also did cycles subsequently, which I know would be very dear to you. I mean, I've been to every cycle factory in the world, used to buy hundreds of thousands of bikes. Anyway, I ended up, I think it was about 26, 27, I was running all of the stock control and distribution for Halfords, and then they tried to persuade me when the buying controller left to take his job, and I didn't want to do it. I was saying, I'm not creative, I don't want to do this. But the chief executive persuaded me via psychometric testing to prove I was. Yeah. And again, me arguing, very Carol. And I ended up as head of buying for Halfords. And the reason this is important in my story is that is 10 years, almost to the day, that I left Douglas High School with 2 rubbish A-levels. And, there's a lot of people in the world who are entrepreneurs who left school with no A-levels and no qualifications because, in 10 years after I left, I was head of buying for one of the world's predominant automotive aftermarket retailers. And, I just want to say that to everybody who may be listening, that you should never limit yourself, because my dad taught me that you don't believe you can't do it. Not you believe you can do it, but why do you think you can't do it? How hard can it be? That's what my dad used to say. So every time I was given an opportunity, I pretty well said that. So we were then had a great time doing that. 34 people applied for the job. I was strong-armed to apply for the job. And then most of them ended up working for me. And again, going back to my story of the Poly, they were mainly men.
Yeah.
And therefore, I was heading up a team of, well, they were all men, the buyers of Halfords in the automotive industry. On the cycle side, we had one female buyer.
Yeah.
But then the weird part was the person who was the head of them all was me, who knew nothing about cars and nothing about cycling, but I knew about retail, I knew about the customer mindset, and I knew how to sell. That is one of the key probably learnings that every single one of us can benefit from. Don't look at it from what you're providing and selling. Look at it through the shoes and the eyes of the person who's buying. Big mistake that people make. We were then bought by Boots. Another great story about Boots. Sorry, I don't want to keep you here all night, Sharon, but Boots bought Halfords. Halfords was bought by lots of companies, and we grew each time, and we grew like from 100 million to 400 million in 5 years. It was the most amazing growth
that is amazing
trajectory, and we were a small team, and we were very dynamic. Our chief exec was 42. I ended up heading Halfords automotive business when I was 33.
Yeah.
So, it was a really dynamic team. But I went to the Boots Senior Management Worldwide Conference, and there were 200 of the 200 top leaders within Boots at it. And the first day, there's a guy standing at the bar, and I go up and I chat to him because I'm Manx and I chat to everybody. And I kept thinking, gosh, you're familiar to me. And I'm chatting to him and I can't place his accent. And I say to him, you've got an unusual accent. Where are you from? And he said, I'm from a small island. And I'm like, me too. Anyway, it turns out that he was a guy called David Neal. He headed the biggest division of Boots. He was from Ballabruey. His brother is Ken Neal, who I know well these days, the retired inspector in the police. So the two of us were in the top 200 leaders of leaders in Boots at the same time. And you think, how did that happen from the Isle of Man?
It's amazing, isn't it, how many times you find people from the Isle of Man, they punch above their weights. You just look at, examples like Mark Cavendish and Sam Barks.
Exactly.
World leaders in their fields.
So anyway, I was very happy doing what I was doing. And then I had one of those sort of things that happened to us all. I had a big personal crisis in that my mum died suddenly, age 60. And the bottom fell out of my world. I was 34. I was, leading this amazing job, traveling the world, doing absolutely everything. My sisters were here. My dad was still here. And I just didn't cope well with it. Yeah. And I look back now as a coach and I think, gosh, I wish I'd had a coach then. Yeah. Because I could have considered more options about what I could have done, or maybe I would have made the same decision. Who knows? I mean, you can't regret the decisions you made, but it's certainly something that I work on with clients, or I try to find clients to help who are having one of those personal crises.
Do you have a coach now?
Yes, I do. Yeah. I have a coach who supervises me, and I also have my own. My psychotherapy coach is all to do with me coaching other people to make sure that I'm not taking on any of their issues. But my own coach is Jason Goldberg, who's in Los Angeles, who is absolutely amazing. And, he pushes me to be the best person I can be, because that's what we coaches do.
Yep.
So anyway, I came back to the Isle of Man. I contacted Derek Nicholson, who, is one of the owners of Isle of Man Enterprises and ShopRite. And at that time, they were setting up in Scotland. So I came here, got familiar with the business and the organisation, and then they focused on Scotland, and I ran the Isle of Man for the next few years.
Gosh.
And then I was the marketing director for Scotland as well, because I've never been very good at doing one thing at a time. It's another of my things. We came back to the Isle of Man, stayed focused on that. Then I left and went to work as a chief exec in the government, which is the hardest thing I've ever done. To go somewhere in a culture that is so totally different to you and so structured was very, very hard.
Yeah. It's not retail, is it?
It's not retail. It's not entrepreneurial. It's not intrapreneurial. I was very, very, very pleased with the work and the delivery we did on the TT races, because it was in a very bad shape when I went there and I had no idea. So, I'm very proud of everything we achieved there. But anyway, it was not meant to be for me. I was just under 5 years as a chief exec in the government.
Giving it a good go.
But it took its toll. It took its toll on me. Yeah. And I lost my dad as well. So, a bit like losing my mum just before the centenary of the TT. My dad came to tea one Sunday, and by the following Sunday, he'd gone.
Oh, dear.
And that was 6 weeks before the centenary. So I really struggled with that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And then in the centenary itself, which was amazing, there was a horrible incident on the very last the senior race, and I really struggled with that as well. And then I think that's pretty much when I knew that I couldn't stay, because I had just too much. And again, I needed help. And one of the messages I want to give to everybody is there are times we need help. And there are people who can help us, not just a coach. There are some amazing people who work in counselling and psychotherapy on the Isle of Man these days.
Yes, there are.
And I want to encourage everybody to remember that I said that. It's probably the most important thing I'll say in this podcast.
Yeah.
That we all have these things that happen. Anyway, I left, took a year out, did voluntary work with Age Concern, helped the great Penny Crichton do a load of things with
Gosh,
Age
didn't
Concern.
she? Gosh, Penny, wow.
Amazing woman.
Yeah, no, indeed.
And what an inspiration to someone like me at the time who'd lost their way a bit. And I can't, it's weird for me to say that, but it's the truth. I'd lost my way. So I got back into things. Then I went to a funeral. It's like 4 weddings and lots of funerals and not many weddings in this story.
Oh,
I went to a funeral and sat next to Derek Nicholson, who said, "What are you doing? Why don't you come back?" So I did some project work for him. And then I ended up going back. And as with many things with Derek, I was worked in things I never knew. So I filled in when the head of the IT director gave up, and I ran IT. And then I got involved in commercial property, which I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
And I did that for him. And I did board projects and sort of things around the whole the commercial law area, because that had been part of my background with Halfords and Boots as well.
Yeah, okay.
So I did that and stayed there. And then as I was approaching a really big birthday in 2016, I actually thought, come on, Carol, what are you going to do now? Because there's more here. You can't start bringing the curtains closed. And I thought hard, what is it you really enjoy? And what I love is helping other people be at their best, helping young people in particular see what they're capable of.
Yeah,
so I
can see that in some of the roles that I can see you volunteer in even till today.
I did a lot of that, and then I decided I would do something, and goes right back to the very beginning of this very long bit here. But I decided to get some qualifications, so non-academic. Rubbish A-levels, Carol, went off to Bangor University and did a postgrad in executive coaching and mentoring.
Gosh.
And then I did the EMCC accreditation for 2 years. And
That's the European Mentoring and Coaching Council.
Yeah, and I decided, because particularly I'd started quite late, I would go in at a very senior level. So I had to sort of do like 5 years work in 2, on top of working full time and coaching people and everything.
Yeah.
But I coached 31 people, I think, over 3.5 years. Then I did all that. Then I found Jason Goldberg and I trained with him.
Yeah.
Met an amazing coach in America with him. Throughout all of this, I met lots and lots of people on the Isle of Man who either needed coaching or mentoring.
Yeah,
and
sure.
the biggest impact that everything had on me was entrepreneurship. And the fact that the Isle of Man was not respecting entrepreneurship in the way it should have been.
Yeah.
And I heard that from a 19-year-old that I met through my accountant. And so I set myself off on a mission in 2018 to change the attitude to entrepreneurship and startups and small businesses in the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
So I'm a board member of the Chamber of Commerce and the Business Agency for Entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And that is a real passion of mine. My dad had his own plumbing business. My mum had her own hairdressing business. I didn't consider they were entrepreneurs when we were kids. Dad also worked for people, but they are. And, the Isle of Man has got 99.5% of businesses in the Isle of Man are small entrepreneurial businesses.
Yeah, and they're not just, as you would think, just startups. People wouldn't ordinarily just think it's an entrepreneur is a new business and startup. It's actually can be lawyers, accountants.
They can be anybody who takes the risk themselves. I mean, that's the meaning of the word entrepreneur. You take the risk yourself. I consider myself, Sharon, to be an intrapreneur. I've been in corporate environments. I've been in retail. I've worked for people like Derek Nicholson and his entrepreneurial family. So they're the entrepreneurs, but I'm an intrapreneur. I get the best out of them, but I don't take that final risk apart from now when I have my own business. And I have 3 businesses now.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
I have a property development business, which I never mentioned, which was because of my sister who wanted to set her business up. So I ended up buying an old bank in 2013 and doing that up and backing my sister. And then I have Carol Glover, the Maverick Maker, which is my coaching business, and I'm probably most known for. And then I have a pretty new business as well. So.
Yeah. So I know that you went off to Scotland, didn't you, for a part? So, what did you do in Scotland?
Well, what I did, I worked with Jason Goldberg, and in that, I worked with, this is another great tip for people in the Isle of Man. You know, there are so many great groups and organisations online that you can be part of. Yeah. And I was part of Jason's programme for training and developing senior coaches. And all the other coaches were American, European, Australian. I mean, it was hard to catch up with our times. But there was one American lady I got on particularly well with. And only really late on did I discover she was in Scotland. And my life story revolves around, I have Peter and I, my very long, 36 years this year husband, we've never had kids, but we've had dogs for 30 years. Yeah. And we had 2 little dogs, and we lost one in 2019 in April. Oh. And yeah, it was sad, but it was his time. Yeah. And so I thought, here's another message, because I'm very into intuition and feeling messages, and this is very retail and very entrepreneurial, to feel the thing, and it's a really good thing, and it's a really important thing, and not enough people feel their way forward. And it's a lot of people use the word intuition these days. Mm-hmm. It's all about intuition and feelings, and it's the place where the really good decisions live. So I decided then, spoke to my husband, and we thought, right, I'm going to give up everything, give up all the jobs and directorships and everything I've got here, piled ourselves and Bertie, our little old schnauzer, in the car, and off we went to Gourock in Scotland to work with Marion Morrison. Yeah. And Marion is an amazing American woman, and she coaches on self-leadership, which is Jason Goldberg's, absolute heart story. And she and I do leadership. She's self-leadership, and I'm leadership development and being a female leader, particularly in a male world. And there are lots of good reasons that that's important, because women have an inherent skill set that is golden in the 2020s for being a leader, but a lot of them are not using it. They are mirroring what men do, whereas we need to do what we do best. And so this is my thing, and this is my little mission, if you like, on that. So Marion and I have a business called Encoded Potential. In fact, it's just been set up very recently in the Isle of Man. And Encoded Potential is what we were born with. I mean, every one of us could have been Elon Musk. They could have been Beyonce. Any one of us could have been the day we were born. We have been shaped and changed and moved around by everything that's happened to us. The schooling thing, the peers. I was having lunch today with the most brilliant 22-year-old that I know, and she said she's been reading some Swedish psychology that says that children shouldn't be with other children because they're not getting to develop and grow as quickly as they could. They're being kept down to the level of children. And I thought, wow, that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. It is an interesting perspective, yes. You'll struggle to change that quickly, though.
Well, I know, because we've got, but the trouble is there are a lot of people now in the world with where we have to be. What we need to be great workers, great leaders, and great humans is an inherent human skill set now. Not all this learned, as I call it, academic. And by the way, my sister Jane is a world-famous professor in neuroscience, so she's super academic, but still bonkers. She's not. She's Jane Roscombe's, Dr. Jane Roscombe. She's not. She's not academic in the conventional sense at all. But what we need to have is huge emotional intelligence. We need to understand ourselves. We need to understand others. We need to be adaptable, flexible, great communicators, and the number one, problem solving. We need to look at things that are going on and going down and quickly have a way of calling on our knowledge and our subconscious to quickly fix it and move forward.
Yeah, no, you've kind of moved on there to the part about. If you don't mind, I think we should go back to that when we talk about the opportunities for the Isle of Man. But so the business that you're in Scotland that you formed with Marion, that's called Encoded Potential. Yeah. So that's your third business. Yeah. Brilliant. Gosh.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's really fab.
It's weird. And the thing about Encoded Potential is we met a client when we were there. We met someone at a night. We went to a night for ladies, lady entrepreneurs and business women. And we met some people who were visiting the area. And I didn't know the area terribly well because I was only there in the end for 3.5 months because my dog was very sick and I came home. But we didn't realise that Amazon had a huge base about 3 or 4 miles away, and some of the senior figures were there visiting. Gosh. And we met them. Right. And they talked to us about what we were doing. So we followed up with them. We kept making proposals to them. I came back to the Isle of Man. We did the same. And they asked us if we would give them a proposal to do. This was probably February, like this time a year ago.
Yeah. Right.
Yes, exactly. To do 4 live events in Europe for them with female leaders, what they call power leaders, which is procurement women represented. That's one of their in-house names. And it was for women in procurement. And remember, I'd been head of buying for Halfords, and that's procurement and whatever. So I did that. We did that. And then it was, it was finished and we couldn't do it. And then it came back on the table. And then they asked us if we'd do it as a live event. So in November for 2 days, we did Marion and Guruk, me here.
And that's in 2020?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, this was last year. We did a 10-hour live event across 2 days. And because it was online, we were doing it for Amazon Europe, female leaders in procurement. They opened it up to worldwide. So we had Americans, Canadians, Indian people, Asian people. And I loved that because, to me, working with Jason Goldberg, coaching is so advanced. He's in Los Angeles these days. It's so advanced in that part of the world. So for us to be taking a coaching-led workshop to people in California was just incredible.
It is amazing. Oh, well done. Well done. But so just you came back though to the Isle of Man because of the dog. Bertie was unwell.
Yeah.
But he's all right now.
He's coming up to 15.
Gosh.
So and he's the boss in our house.
Right.
But, it's again the intuition thing, Sharon. Bertie was very ill over Christmas and New Year in 2019 and New Year.
Yeah.
And we got back up to Scotland on the 6th of January and Bertie was really unhappy, really unhappy. And Peter and I, he and his brother and the other dogs we've had been at our world. So I said to my husband, I can't settle if Bertie's not happy. The intuition again.
Yeah.
Now, the thing people need to know about intuition and these feelings that I talk about, because I have lived my life through this without knowing what it was. It's 2 things. Gut reaction. Anyone ever used the phrase gut reaction? We have almost as many neuron receptors in our gut as we have in our brain. And therefore, that idea that you're sick to the stomach, you've got a gut reaction, hold on, I can feel it in my gut. You really flipping can. So if you can, listen to it, because it's trying to tell you something really important. It could be bad and it can be good. So we changed our boat booking, came home
in February.
Yeah, in January
29th, 2020. And lockdown happened in March.
It did. And we kept saying, there's a reason Bertie's brought us home.
Yeah.
And almost immediately as well, people contacted me to do coaching with them to give them to do some work with them.
It was a whole sort of, I mean, at the time I'd started this, I launched this podcast right during lockdown when it started. And I think the number of time that Maslow's hierarchy of needs came up, I mean, I think probably for the first time in many of our lives, felt that sort of, that very bottom layer, that food and shelter, that sort of, oh my goodness, this is serious stuff. But I think we've moved on greatly here.
I think as well that I was very fortunate. I was very pleased to be asked to be a trustee of the Manx Solidarity Fund as soon as it was founded. And I stood down in November because I got super, super busy. It's an amazing group of volunteers who hit the ground running. But we used to talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs all the time.
Yeah, interesting.
Because I can say it now. I didn't really used to tell people because we didn't really want people to know who did what. But I led the applications team, so I actually saw every application. And, that is why we had to have some criteria to look at them. We had our objects, obviously, of the trust, but also just what help can we give these people? What have they got? And, it is... I don't think we ever, particularly in the Isle of Man, where we've been super, super fortunate, I don't think we have any appreciation of the real horrors and hardships that some people have been going through.
No.
And we've been very fortunate, and across the water, heaven helped people.
No, I agree. I did a podcast with Paul Hotchkiss very early on. Actually, I think it was episode 4 or 5 or something about the Manx Solidarity Fund. So it's good that you've mentioned that again today. So if you don't mind me asking, and I do primarily ask people this in my ordinarily day job, the financial planning role. What's your earliest memory of money, Carol?
Well, I'm glad you've asked me about this, because if I've got a weakness in my whole life, it's been my attitude to money. We were brought up, I often describe us as being poor. We weren't poor. We were the happiest, liveliest, craziest family, probably in Douglas, let
5
alone
girls,
in our street. And, we were the Roscombe sisters.
You were half a Harlequins hockey team.
Yeah, at least, yeah. And... But my mum gave up working to bring us up, and then Dad worked as a plumber at a time when you haven't got Camden plumbers earning $100,000 a year, and my dad really struggled. We really struggled. And I was very lucky being the eldest. I mean, my 5th sister was still wearing my clothes, 18 years later and stuff.
Gosh.
But I remember that it being the subject of a lot of rows and a lot of issues and a lot of pressure. Yeah. And when I went off to college, I was very lucky to have got a full grant. That's the other thing about the Isle of Man. I would never have been able to go to Teesside without getting a full grant. But I also had worked from the age of 13 out of necessity, as did all my sisters.
Yes.
So this is how we grew up. We were absolutely marvellous examples of the Protestant ethic and the spirit of capitalism culture. Even though my dad was a trade unionist, we were all like, you work hard, you work. And I see this a lot in clients now, because maybe it was the era. So when I got my first job, in fact, I never ever thought I would tell this story, but I'm going to, because I love it. I don't love it. It's just the way my attitude to money is. So my very first job, I saved and saved and saved, because it was my mum and dad's 25th wedding anniversary. And my mum's ambition in life had been to go to Spain. So everything I earned that first year, I put into buying a holiday in Spain for my mum and dad for their silver wedding. And, it was the greatest, I think it's the greatest thing my mum and dad could have done for it. And I'm not saying it because I'm great. I'm saying it because that was my attitude to money. That
It is better. It always feels better to give, doesn't it?
Always.
It's just so
I'm
obvious.
the worst receiver there'll ever be. You only ask my husband. Someone asked me what I got for Valentine's Day, and I said, I picked the book out on Amazon and left it on the tablet for him.
Here's a hint, darling.
Yes. Yeah, and I got that. But I also got a sponge as well, so I was pretty pleased with that.
A sponge?
A sponge.
To clean the car with?
No, just a sponge. No, it's great. I'll be happy with it. Anyway, the next thing about money was, I think I started a lot of my young life in fear of money, because I'd grown up against this backdrop of rows and difficulties.
Never enough.
And then my dad, when I was a student, was working on the roof of what's now the police station, and the scaffolding gave way, and my dad should have died probably, and he didn't, but he couldn't work for like the best part of 2 years.
Gosh.
And the family were in Horrorsville. So as soon as I left college, again, the money that I had, I
went home.
And that was the way we were. And the whole family was a bit like that. I have found money, I'd say I started out thinking money was a bit of an evil, because it was the source of the only unhappiness I'd experienced at home.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
And so my attitude to it has been very difficult. And I've had very big jobs, and I've earned a lot, and I've had great provision made for my pension and all of these things, as a lot of people did. I mean, I had huge jobs in my 20s. That is another tip. Every young person who ever works for me, I don't get them, I encourage them hard to start paying into their pension then, because that pays back so much, however they want to do it.
Yeah, the time value of money.
Exactly. And so that was that. And to be honest, giving up working in 2019 was horrendous for me as a decision, because I always sort of thought I might work till the day I fall over. And I have, like yourself, a very good financial advisor who still says to me now, Carol, it's not meant to be kept in an account somewhere. But I really am still a bit uncomfortable about it. And I want to say that for the benefit of anyone else who's uncomfortable about it. Yeah. Because I sort of tend to live my life pretending it's not there.
Wonder what that says about what you're holding on to.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yeah,
you're right. I did some a lifestyle plan in early 2019, and that really helped me see what the future might look like, and that gave me a lot of comfort. And I've done a lot of mindset work on abundance versus scarcity. That's interesting to me. But this would be one of my Achilles' heels, and always has been. And this is me talking as a coach. I need a flipping money coach to give me a good boot up the backside, I think.
I might know a good one. Okay. Well, thanks very much for sharing that. That's fascinating. So of all the things you've done throughout your life so far, Carol, what's given you the most fulfillment?
I love developing younger people. Love it. There was a little thing a couple of years ago. I was at Halfords and I became head of buying. And we used to take on graduate trainees and students. And we took a student on, and he was a great guy, one of the first people I ever took on. And he ended up coming back after uni, like I did with the Polytechnic. He came back and he worked, and he was an absolute star. And I, like everybody who worked for me, this was just somebody that I was able to develop incredibly. And when I left, he went off into Boots. And when Boots opened in Douglas, he came to the opening, and him and his dad went out with us. And by now, he was heading all of foreign sourcing for Boots. But about 3 years ago on LinkedIn, I got a message, and the message said something about President New York City. And I'm like, what? Who on earth? The President of New York City. So I look it all up, and it's this guy.
Gosh.
And he was the president of Limited Brands of America, a huge retail conglomerate.
Yeah.
And so I made contact with him, and he sent me a lovely message saying that, I had been absolutely fundamental to the career that he'd had, a bit like, me saying about Harry Taverner, and lots of people in my career, lots of mentors who've been fantastic, as well as my leaders, my mentors. And that's why I have such a passion for mentorship. But I did it's another thing that gives me fulfillment, and there's a couple of funny stories. So Marion and I, we have started our business, and our first client is Amazon. It's pretty hard to follow that. And they've booked us for more work this year. We're going to do more this year all over Europe. But I was telling a student intern I had recently about when I was at the government and we had the Villa Marina. And I'm big music. Music's one of my great passions. And I wanted to put on some really good music at the Villa while I was the chief exec of the department. And I didn't know where to start. And that's an important part of my story, because I often don't know where to start. And the journey of finding out how to do these things is fundamental to the success and achievement and the sense of achievement, I feel. So I found that Andy Kershaw had moved to the Isle of Man, who's no longer living here, but I found him, I met him, introduced him to the minister, asked him if he could find us anyone for the villa, and he phoned somebody up, and they promised they would come.
I know who you're going to say.
They promised who they would say, and I at the time I had a lime. The whole reason I told this story recently was I was mentioning that I had a lime green Citroen Plurial, which I see around on the roads still.
Right.
And so this person came. It wasn't all swimming and straightforward, but this person came. So the first act I ever promoted as a promoter was Robert Plant.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We went.
And I picked him up. I picked him up from the airport in my lime green Citroen Plurial, and he kept saying, "This is a nice little car, isn't it?" Because he speaks sort of quite poshly, but he's also quite black country. Yeah, it was Robert Plant.
Yeah.
So what I was
Led
saying,
Zeppelin, the lead singer.
And I gave him a lift in my Plurial, and he played 2 amazing nights. But we put on lots and lots of acts after that, because once you do something major, you can do it.
Yeah.
And there's a thing to be said for the apprenticeship and taking your time. But I often say, well, we don't have the time. Come on, let's go for it. What would it take to achieve this ridiculous thing? But my sense of satisfaction and fulfillment is not for me. It's for the team and the wider organisation. And in that case, it was for the people of the Isle of Man.
Yeah,
and it was like the centenary of the TT. That was an amazing experience for everyone involved.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks. That's an excellent story. Thanks so much, Carol. For any aspiring or existing business owner or entrepreneur, this should be good, this one. What would be your number one business tip? No pressure.
No, it's fine, actually, because I spoke to 2 young people today, both of who want to work with me over the next year, and they both want to found their own businesses, and they thought, maybe if they worked with me on the Restart scheme, which is by the Department for Enterprise, they could at the end of it have their own businesses on the go, which is great thinking, and so I'm very impressed with them. I think the most important thing, and I don't know whether you agree with this, Sharon, being an entrepreneur yourself, is purpose. You've got to absolutely flipping know your purpose. There's all this great stuff about passion, and passion keeps you going. Passion keeps refilling the tank. In my case, it's enthusiasm. I'm always described as enthusiastic. Enthusiasm is my superpower. So on any given day, if someone says, Carol, we want you to get Robert Plant in 2 weeks, then my enthusiasm will do it. Yeah. But it's the getting Robert Plant that matters. Yeah. That's what I want to do, and that's how I want to do it. Yeah. And you've got to be prepared for changing it, but you've got to start somewhere. Yeah. So people used to talk to me about, it's like, I want to go to London. Now, to get to London from the Isle of Man, if it's foggy, I might have to go on the boat to Heysham. The trains might be cancelled. I might have to get 4 coaches. I might have to hitchhike. I might have to then take a train from somewhere. But I'll get there.
Yeah.
So that is what it's about.
Yeah, purpose.
It's probably purpose, pivoting and passion would be 3, but the first one is purpose always. Simon Sinek's great talk, Finding Your Why, is a brilliant place for any budding
Pretty
entrepreneur.
good book, actually.
It's a great place for any budding entrepreneur to start thinking. And if you can't say what your why is, you're not quite ready.
No, I mean, we do a lot of retirement planning, as you know, and purpose is front and centre.
Yeah.
You know, it's all very well saying, what are you going to retire from? It's what are you going to retire to? So enough money to sleep at night, but something to get up for in the morning.
Yeah.
That's it. It's absolutely key.
I think it's the secret to life, that.
Oh,
I think it's, and I think, given we're talking in a time of COVID, it's the hardest thing for people, because everything is like Groundhog Day at the moment.
It is, yeah.
I think, or the Truman Show.
Yeah.
You know, the guy with the Isle of Man is living the Truman Show. We've got a bubble over us,
isn't it just?
And we are getting up every morning and going, "Hello, everybody," and off I go again, and I'm going home at night, and then the next day, "Hello, everybody." So having some things within us, and I've done quite a bit of work on myself this year. I've done. I set myself a target in the lockdown to walk 50 kilometres. Walked 102, so I'm very proud of myself.
Very
I have
good.
a very disabled foot these days, so it wasn't an easy ask. But I'm also reading books that I've gone back to, some amazing books. One I finished this morning is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and it's the book about staying in the present. Yeah. And I've read it 4 times now in my life, and I read it when I need it.
Yeah, that's great. You would send me a link to that. We can put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
You know, all the resources that we that you tell us about today.
Yeah.
So many people just want to be able to know where to reference that book. So fantastic. Yeah. What do you do to relax when you're not on the Truman Show?
Well, Bertie's quite old now, so it was a lot of dog walking.
Yeah.
So that's less dog walking, perhaps, or less walking. I'm back doing my power walking. I've always been fit. I mean, you and I met quite a few. Reconnected at the gym a few
We did,
years
didn't we?
ago,
Back at Elite, yes.
Yeah. And I've always been sporty, and I like to be sporty. So I haven't done my mountain biking for quite a while, mainly because my bike is a bit rusty these days.
I've been on my bike since October. It's just been a bit cold and wet.
Yeah, exactly. My number one passion is reading. And it's reading.
But that's fiction, though, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I do a personal growth book, or not personal growth, a book about that's going to develop me at any point in time. Now, the Valentine's gift I had from my husband was called Freak, the biography of my idol and the person I most want to see like in the world, Nile Rodgers, who was the frontman of Chic.
Oh, okay.
But he also has produced the biggest selling albums for David Bowie, Madonna, Duran Duran, Diana Ross, and most recently he's known for working with people like Pharrell Williams and Daft Punk.
Oh, blimey.
But he's a guy that, you know, has been around all of my life and kept reinventing himself.
Yeah,
so that's, I think it's really important that you have people like that. So that's that. I'm reading The Buddha and the Badass by Vishen Lakhiani, which is a spiritual approach to success and wealth.
Yeah.
So not wealth, but success. So I'm reading that. I'm just about to read Think Again by Adam Grant. Now, this is a great story. This is my story of the weekend. So Adam Grant is the professor of, he's a professor at Wharton Business School in Pennsylvania. And I've known of him a long time, and he's one of the greatest thinkers on leadership and management at the moment in the world. I follow him all the time, and I noticed on Friday night when I was working at my laptop that he was on live in 5 minutes' time on Instagram, so I went onto it. And he was on with a lady called Julia Samuels, who I didn't really know, but she's a psychotherapist. And it was a really interesting interview, and they started to talk about another pet subject of mine, which is curiosity. So I put a post, a little comment that said... I was described as disruptive at school, like all my sisters, because we wanted to know more than the teacher was telling us and kept asking, and we got into trouble for it. And I'm sitting listening, and then the next minute the lady goes, Here's an interesting point from Carol Glover coaching in the Isle of Man. And here's her and Adam Grant. I love the internet. Talking about what I'd said. And this whole point about don't shut down curiosity in those young people. Let it out.
Totally.
Because that is where ideas, innovation, brilliance and creativity, the encoded potential that's inherently within us, live.
You're right. You're so right. So moving on Tell me, what do you think are the best things about living in the Isle of Man?
Well, I've certainly got to super appreciate them over the last 13 months.
Have we all?
Yeah. The number one, I think, that the number one is the sense of community and the people. It has to be. You know, I've lived in a lot of places before I came back to the island. I've done a lot of voluntary work in my time. I've met lots of groups of people. But the support and the help and the sticking the neck out for others throughout COVID has been second to none. And I don't just mean the community in that sense. I also mean how everyone has worked for everyone else throughout COVID. I don't think we've seen that, have we? We're sitting here in our bubble land, Truman Show Island, but at the same time, we've seen people on, Bournemouth Promenade not wearing masks and not social distancing and everything. We've really not experienced that.
Not really. No, they're all in Derby, those lot.
Yeah. No, I don't. I think that, I think we've all been super respectful and super responsible.
Yeah.
There's been a few little glitches, but I don't believe there has. And so I want to live in a place like that. I mean, I did a thing last year at Mindful Man, and I called it the #Weevolution, because I think if we all work together, we can create much better futures than leaving it to the random policies of the government or whatever. I think it is grassroots. It needs to come from the bottom. We need to work together. And there's a lot of this going on in the island at the moment.
There is, isn't there? Yeah.
I want it to gain momentum, and I particularly want this message in the heads of the young. The future is all about, it's their island. It's not my island. And it's their island. And if they don't like it, they need to know they can have my permission to change it.
Yeah.
Just get on and do something and do it better than it's being done now. That is progress.
Yeah. And good people can't help but change it.
No.
Yeah. So what would you say the main challenges are the Isle of Man faces?
I think the one for me personally, being, a maverick thinker, is in the whole area of innovation and thinking differently and where's the next big thing coming from. I think we're a little bit same old at the moment. And I say that as a member of the Business Agency Board and the Chamber of Commerce Board, because I say that to them. Where are the next big ideas coming from? I think we have to realise that I read a book January last year, hilarious. The leading edge futuristic book in the world last January was called The Future is Faster Than You Think. I'd say half of it is eradicated now. But one of the things that I really took on board was I think it was Professor Rose at Yale, said that within 10 years, most of the monolithic organisations in the world will no longer exist. And he meant the banks, the big institutions, the public sector. Now, he said that last January, about 10 years' time. It's going to be nothing like 10 years' time. That needs to change. What I really want the Isle of Man, and I post a lot about this recently, is I want the Isle of Man to celebrate what it's good at and to be small and brilliant at what it does, because it can be. You mentioned Mark Cavendish, you mentioned Sandbox. There are, remember my thing about Robert Plant, if you can do it once, you can do it again. How can we grow our own brilliance from within? Now, I can see it in the startup world on the Isle of Man. There is an amazingly talented, gifted, creative, passionate startups. What we need to do as an island, and I'm working hard on this with both Chamber of Commerce and the Business Agency, is create an enabling culture and the support and the financial guidance and support that's needed to help people. Because the first 3 years is terrifying in a new business. It's terrifying for people. And you're getting these young people coming out of university wanting to have a business and having no idea how terrifying it's going to be. So we need to help them. We need better incubation. And we also then need to find the really exceptional ideas that are in there and put them in a super incubator and help them go much, much faster. Yeah. Because there are people here, and one of them who's got the most brilliant fledgling business model is Rachel Glover, who is usually more known for testing and stuff, but her inherent business is exactly the sort of niche, clever business that the Isle of Man needs.
Yeah, I've interviewed her about it.
Yeah, and we need like 100 of these. And I know of, clusters of them. We need to make that more enabled. We had, I think I said earlier, there are 99.5% of businesses in the Isle of Man are small and medium enterprises. We are no different from America, the UK, the rest of the world. That is how it is. But 85% of our businesses are micro businesses, and they employ less than 9 people. And those are some of the businesses where the real brilliance is. And people don't even know they exist. So what we're not getting is the benefit of clustering and sharing knowledge and sharing information.
Yeah. There's a book Matthew Syed wrote, Rebel Ideas. Have you read that one?
No, but I've read 2 Matthew Syeds, because obviously Rebel Ideas, I'm a maverick. You know, this is like my own thinking process. I mean, I've been very fortunate to work so closely with a great maverick thinker, Derek Nicholson, for a lot of the time I've been on the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that business shouldn't exist, and it exists because of that man's ability and the team around him to feed into it and to you know, develop it, to be determined, gritty, persistence. You know, all those words I used earlier, but to see opportunity and to feel the opportunity and to go for the opportunity. The island has what I call too many fixed mindsets.
Yeah.
The big book I read as a trainee coach was Mindset by Carol Dweck.
Yeah.
And I realised that the secret of my success, because I'd always wondered after those 2 awful A-levels, the secret of my success was my growth mindset.
You need to stop giving yourself a hard time about 2 A-levels.
No, I just laugh about it. I've still got the certificate. I always wondered what it was, because, you know, you think, sometimes... No, I don't actually. I sound like I'm doing imposter syndrome, but it always fascinates me. And now as a coach, I do a lot of reflective thought. So I do force myself.
Do you journal?
I journal every day. And journaling is one of the best things I do. And I do it 2 ways.
I do it too. It's amazing.
I do it in the front, but in the back is everything I learn.
Right. Okay.
And also what I'm doing a lot now for my business is my own quotes. You know, and like podcasts like this, I will listen back and I will write down all the quotes that, you know, where I think I really nail my own approach and my own mindset, because I need to keep strong on the things I believe, because this world is going to be very interesting and full of opportunities over the next 5 years.
Isn't it just? Yeah.
And I work with some great young people, and I'm so lucky to do that, because they keep me young and in tune and growing.
It is. It's all very well to ask these people questions about what it is they think, but are we even asking them the right questions? I
think that the trouble is the closed question thing. You see, that's the whole thing about coaching. Coaching is about open questions. And I've learned some immense things very recently from 2 young clients I coach, from asking them the sort of question you've just asked me. You know, what would you do for the Isle of Man? Question, answer, get a Starlink down base. And I'm like, okay, what's Starlink? And what's the down base?
Yeah.
Starlink is exactly.
Starlink, yes, I've heard of Starlink.
Elon Musk's satellites.
Yeah.
But they're going to have so many down stations around the world.
Yes.
And this person's like, why isn't the Isle of Man getting one? So I immediately go off and start asking, why isn't the Isle of Man getting one?
So when are we getting one?
I don't know. But it basically supersedes, as far as I understand, supersedes 5G.
Yeah.
Supersedes all the fibre and the fibre and the cables.
Ooh, that'll go down well.
But these are the conversations that those young... It is amazing the knowledge that young people have got today. Amazing.
Yeah. Isn't it just?
And, you know, something I wanted to say on that is when I set out as a coach, I thought I was going to be coaching entrepreneurs. But you know what? I've coached more lawyers, accountants, bankers, professionals who realise that if they don't start thinking differently and learn to think differently and see things differently, their businesses will be under direct threat.
Yeah, they already are, I guess.
Yeah. And so the clever ones are learning that there's a different way. They inherently, they sort of know it because they're good, and they just want to practice. And that's the advantage that, you know, coaching can give in a place like the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is, it's not a hotbed of coaching, I would say. There's quite a few coaches operating here at the moment, but people don't realise the need and the benefit of coaching.
No, I think you're right. Yeah. Okay. Coming to the end of our conversation today, but I mean, what have you got planned next?
Well, I have brought you a gift here.
Oh, my word.
I don't have many of them, but here's a sticker.
Oh, wow.
And it says Lead Big.
Lead Big.
And this is our new programme. Marion and I have done a new programme, and it's Lead Big for Brave Women Leaders. And we're launching it on International Women's Day. We're doing a worldwide video for Amazon on Lead Big, because we're doing events for Amazon around Lead Big for Brave Women Leaders. But we're also going to be using that on, we're setting up a Facebook group, which we'll be publicising early March. And You'll be able to join the Facebook group and interact with Marion and I as we take everybody in a safe place on a journey to unlock what everyone needs to be a brave women leader. And within that, men are happy. We're very happy for men or any genders to come because we want to create an environment where, as I said right at the start, women use their strengths and their inherent skill set that is very different. The intuition, the emotional intelligence, the, doing multiple things, being adaptable. That is what Lead Big is going to be about.
Sounds very exciting. Right. I look forward to hearing more about that. You've mentioned already a load of books that you've read. Yeah. Is there one specific that you would recommend as a source of inspiration, or a combination of all that you've mentioned, really?
I've got a couple of books. I'll mention a few and then you can decide. So Mindset by Carol Dweck is a brilliant for anyone in the Isle of Man. The trouble with Mindset is it's about experts. So we have revered expert knowledge, and of course a doctor needs to have expert knowledge, and lawyers need to have expert knowledge. But a lot of people don't need to have expert knowledge. They need to be able to try new things, fail a bit, feel comfortable failing, learn new things. It's very much the entrepreneurial way. So that's one. Also wanted to mention, the favourite book I read in 2019, and this is a really important book for the Isle of Man, is called Range by David Epstein. And it's how generalist leaders win in a specialised world. Right. Because I'm a generalist leader. I've had 26 leadership roles in 19 different, sectors. So I know how to take something, think, I've done something like that before, and apply it over here.
So transferable skills.
Totally, yeah. Analogical thinking is what they're calling it. And, I'm a very analogical thinker. And sadly, I chatted to someone today about the Restart programme who had an amazing array of transferable and skills in various areas. And they've been applying for jobs and people don't think they've done enough of this and done enough of that. And, we've got to get that out of our headset, Isle of Man. We've got to get out there and start seeing the world as our opportunity.
Totally.
And what do we need to create the knowledge and the products in the Isle of Man and sell them to the world.
Yeah.
And in doing that, there is a book I have given to my mate Stephen Bradley, the head of the business agency, recently. If anyone wants to know about innovation and how to innovate, the best book of last year on this is called Loon Shots by Safi Bakal. And it's how to innovate. So anyone in the Isle of Man who wants to innovate, that is the book to read.
I'm sure he'll appreciate it. Do you have a favourite quote?
I have two favourite quotes which apply to what we've said today. Being a maverick and being a Carol Maverick, is about, there's a word authenticity used a lot today. And I don't really know, I know the word authenticity, but I also know I've always been Carol and I've always wanted to be Carol. And the one time I wasn't always Carol was when I worked in the public sector. And I realised that I wasn't being true to myself when I reflect. And so to thine own self be true, out of Hamlet, is my favourite personal quote of all time.
Yeah.
But a quote that I gave to somebody today that for like 20 years was on the bottom of every email I ever sent applies to the Isle of Man. And it's by Margaret Mead. And it's never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. So come on, Isle of Man. We can change the world.
Very profound.
We have proved to ourselves in the last 12 months that we can be world leading. A bit like my Robert Plant story. I went for Robert Plant and got it. What else can we go back to being world leading at?
Quite right. Well said. Where can people go to learn more about you, Carol?
Well, I'm pretty active again these days on LinkedIn. Carol Glover, I think it's Carol Glover Coaching. I think I'm Carol Glover Coaching on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Facebook business page I have, and also I do things on Instagram.
Okay.
I have a website, Carol Glover Coaching.
Right.
And of course, we will have very soon the Encoded Potential Facebook group, which is called Lead Big for Brave Female Leaders. But I'll be promoting that in all my socials anyway.
Well, we've got all the links, so we'll put them in the show notes as well for the benefit of our listeners. But yeah, that's great. Thanks so much, Carol, for spending a really fast 45 minutes with us today. And it's been fascinating. Great. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Island Influencers from Thornton Chartered Financial Planners. To find out more and for useful links, visit thorntonfs.com/podcasts.